Welcome to the second episode of Sharks Talk 916, formerly known as Tank Talk. We had a slight name change due to finding out there's a show that Dan Ruzanowski does that's called Tank Talk, and we didn't want to rip him off and get sued because we kind of like the guy. So I'm Chad, and with me is Nolan Torrey, and we're going to just discuss the Sharks. That's what we do on the show. So today, let's go and just jump into it. Obviously, if you are a Sharks fan, you probably know that the NHL All-Star Weekend was in San Jose this week. And Nolan was lucky enough to get to go this weekend. I stayed home because I couldn't afford the outrageous ticket prices. So Nolan's going to tell us a little bit about his experience, and I'll tell you just kind of ideas that I had while I was watching parts of it here at home. So Nolan, take it away.
Yeah, I regret the purchase as well, so be glad you didn't go. No, it was a good time overall. Yesterday we went to the NHL Fan Fair, which was at the Convention Center downtown, which the nice part about All-Star Weekend, at least in San Jose this weekend, is they put all of the events in close proximity to each other. So, I mean, we were able to walk from the Fan Fair back to the game. Fan Fair itself was a cool experience, a lot of photo opportunities, pictures with the Stanley Cup, which unfortunately I didn't get because the wait times were over 4 hours. But the other really cool thing about the fan fairs, they had basically fan versions of the skills contest set up that you could participate in. So they had a whole row of events where they had hardest shots, they had the target shooting, they also had the dangle zone, they called it, which was basically kind of similar to the obstacle course in the real skills competition that the guys had. And they even had the precision passing as well. Obviously not at the same scale as the real thing, but it was cool to see that they try to mimic that for the fans. The big letdown of the Fan Fest was just the wait times. I mean, to do any of that stuff took an hour and a half, so we mostly walked around and didn't really get to do any of it, but it was still cool to see it, and there was a lot of other photo opportunities that were nice to see.
I was going to say, you didn't go down till Saturday, right? So
yeah, so kind of regret that. I'm sure on Thursday you probably would have been able to do all that stuff. Saturday was probably the worst possible day to go because everybody's there for the game, and it's a weekend, of course. I'm sure even today is probably less busy than yesterday, so I imagine most of the tourists have flown back out of town now.
Yeah, I saw a lot of the people on our Sharks fan page that we belong to. They were there Thursday, Friday. Lots of good pictures with the Stanley Cup, pictures with former players and current players. That's the part that I think I was most jealous of, was seeing those pictures roll in. And I was even there Thursday. I just wasn't in San Jose, unfortunately. I was in Cupertino, so I didn't get away and go see that. But that to me was the big part of the All-Stars that was great, was that you got to kind of wander around and see all these people. I know Nolan was around a lot. And
he was, yeah. The box was at the game yesterday, too.
And I saw some pictures with Crankshaft. So, a lot of the former players around is always cool to see.
Yeah.
And I didn't get anything signed. Did you get anything signed while you were there, or did you not even see it?
No, they did have autograph booths, but the times we were there was no Sharks guys there. And they do interviews as well. They were interviewing Shane Doan when I was there yesterday, former Arizona Coyote. They did have Burnsley was there Thursday, and he signed autographs. I know Sharky and Gritty signed autographs one of the days. I know today, I think Dan Boyle and Nabokov are going to be there signing. So today would have been the day to go as far as Sharks alumni.
Yeah, but Boyle would have been a good one to see for sure.
Yeah. Kind of Boyle and Nabokov together. But yeah.
So let's jump into a couple questions. So one thing I want to talk about was I noticed a lot of booing, especially certain players. I wanted to get your take on it, and then I'll kind of share what I thought. But being there, what did you think about the fact that they're booing these players as they come to the All-Stars?
I think it was fine. I don't have an issue with it. Most of the guys, when they asked about it afterward, just said, hey, it shows how much of a loyal fan base they are, how much they love their team. The only one I didn't like was John Tavares. I thought that was a little unnecessary. I mean, yes, he chose the Maple Leafs over the Sharks in free agency, but that one I don't really get personally. But the other ones, Doughty, Gibson, and Crosby and even Fleury a little bit. Those all make sense because they're rivals, so that I can totally understand.
Yeah, for me, like I would boo Drew Doughty if I saw him on the street. I mean, I'd boo him anyway. I'd probably go to his funeral and boo. But like Tavers, to me, that was the worst because it's like the guy just, I mean, he picked a team, right? And who knows what all decision or what all factors go into making that type of decision. But it seems weird to boo him for just not picking your team.
The kid, he grew up a Maple Leafs fan.
Yeah,
he's going to go there. And arguably they have a better team than the Sharks. That's debatable. But, yeah, so that one I wasn't a fan of, but it is what it is.
I would say overall, though, I'm not a huge fan of the booing. Like I said, I would totally boo Drew Doughty anytime. But I feel like the All-Stars is the time to have all these players come to your town and see your town and kind of – you're also representing Northern California, which doesn't have a ton of hockey. It's a chance to kind of show off, and I feel like to boo guys is just kind of rude. I like the way Fleury took it, though, where he just kind of shrugs it off because he doesn't care.
Yeah, and if you've watched past All-Star games, it's pretty typical. They boo all the rival teams, so it's nothing new. But, yeah, Sharks fans, I guess, aren't be into it. So the next, topic with the All-Star game. So obviously All-Star Weekend started off with the skills competition on Friday night. I thought a couple of really cool moments in the skills competition. The first event was the fastest skater. Nathan McKinnon of the Colorado Avalanche wasn't able to participate due to injury, so they subbed in a Team USA representative from the women's team, Kendall Coyne, which if you watched her skate, she looked like the fastest one to me. Her time may have not been the fastest, but just pure effort and visually, if they didn't have a timer, I would have guessed she would have won personally. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Agreed. Yeah, she was a blur. I liked Pabs saying he didn't want to chase her down. I think Pabs would have to call an Uber to chase her down as fast as she was going. And I think she definitely showed she can skate as fast or up there with the fastest skaters in the NHL. So it was pretty impressive to see. And I thought it was really cool for him to basically say, hey, I can't skate, put her in. From what I could tell, that was organic. It wasn't a staged thing. So that's pretty cool. Yeah,
they've had and then they had, before each of the events, they have someone demonstrate the event, either the mascots or some of the women and Burns and Pavelski's kids demonstrated some of them as well. And then, of course, you had the story where I think it was the Canadian girl that
Brianna Decker.
Yeah, outperformed the guys in, what was it, the precision passing, I think.
Yeah, that was the bigger story to me. Because you have the fastest skate, and she goes in and she skates incredibly fast, but she's second to last, right? When you look at the rankings. But then you have Brianna Decker go in and just demonstrating the passing does better than all the guys who come up after her and actually are competing. I think that's, to me, a bigger story because it's not just you got to be on that stage, but you actually outperformed everybody. I guess you could argue she's not under the same pressure, but to me, she is. She's in front of everybody. She wants to look just as good as she can. So,
yeah, probably a little less pressure because they're just demonstrating. They're not participating. Coyne was actually participating, but
yeah.
So those were cool moments to work in the Canadian and the U.S. women's teams.
And that actually made me think of a question that I didn't run by you beforehand. So this is interesting live TV or live podcasting, I guess. Do you think in the next 10 years you see a female player in the NHL?
No. I don't see it ever happening. They do have their first woman referee, I believe. I want to say that she's in the NHL currently.
I don't know if we have one yet in the NHL, but I think that's
some of the minors. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I think that will definitely happen. You've seen that in the NFL as well. As far as playing, I don't think so. I don't want to get into it in too much detail because I don't want to offend anyone. But I think just the physical strength would be the biggest issue. The speed, as Coyne showed, I don't think would be an issue for some of them. Even the skill, I think they could handle. I think it's just the size and strength is what would prevent it.
Yeah, I agree. And to me, it's more, I think they could definitely be a skill player. Even among the men, you have the skill players that they don't hit all the time, right? They're not overly physical, but they do take checks all the time. And I think that's one of the things that the female hockey players generally don't have to deal with checking in their in their games. And I think that would be a weird transition to go from never really getting checked to suddenly either guys are laying into you and genuinely checking you, which I would hope they would, if a woman's playing, that you would play them just like a man, or they lay off because they don't want to hurt somebody.
Certainly play in the All-Star game, I can tell you that.
Well, I mean, I think you could play in the All-Star game after watching.
So the other another cool moment that happened was Austin Matthews, before he went out there for the target shooting. He pulls off his Maple Leafs jersey and has a Patrick Marleau Maple Leafs jersey. I would like to have seen it be a Sharks one, but I can understand why he didn't do that. That might piss off some Maple Leaf fans. But anyway, he puts on the Marleau jersey. The crowd goes crazy, and he ends up not doing that well, which he talked about after. The reaction kind of made him more nervous, but it was a cool moment to pay tribute to Marleau, and then the Sharks guys got a picture with him, and Pavelski joked afterwards, we should have had him turn around for the picture to see the number, but still.
Oh, yeah, I thought that was neat. I mean, I know some people were kind of like, whatever, but I thought it showed a lot of respect for the fans, too. Like, Marleau was a big deal for us and for the players on the team, and I think it was a nice little tribute in San Jose. I mean, he probably wasn't going to win the skills competition anyway, so to come out and be like, do something for the fans, I think was pretty great.
It would have been nice to have both Marleau and Thornton there. From what I understand, I've heard that the NHL would have put Thornton in, but he decided to take the rest, which he probably needs with all his injuries. The other cool thing about the Marleau jersey, I was reading last night that Matthews had Burns, Pavelski, and Carlson sign it, and then they're going to auction it off for one of the Maple Leafs charities. So that's pretty cool. They're going to auction that jersey off. So,
yeah, I thought it was a cool moment.
Gesture by Matthews, and he's a Bay Area native too. He's from San Ramon, so that made it even more cool. And Marleau's taken both him and Mitch Marner of the Maple Leafs under their wing, and they're really close, so that's part of why he did it as well. So those were the cool moments in the skills competition. As far as the Sharks guys in the skills comp, Burnsy always gets put in the hardest shot because he's not really fit for any of the other events. Started off really embarrassing. He misses the net on his first attempt, which I'm sure the nerves played a part of that. He wanted to impress the crowd. But his second attempt, it was his hardest shot he's ever had. I think it was 100.6. He finally broke triple digits, which I think he ended up in second place for that.
Yeah, I don't know if it was he's been working out specifically to work on that slap shot, or if the fan, there's got to be some juicing there from the fans, right? Like knowing you're in your home crowd. But that's a respectable showing from Burnsy, who usually looks like he doesn't belong in that competition at all.
I think the fans helped him out. I was sort of secretly hoping they might juice the radar gun for him a little bit, but I don't think Burnsy would be a fan of that. So Burnsy was in the hardest shot. Pavelski was in the target shooting. He did reasonably well. I think he ended up finishing up like fourth or something, but he didn't embarrass himself, so I'm sure he was fairly happy with that performance. And
then Carlson was frustrated. Yeah. So when I was reading about this weekend, apparently a lot of the players get frustrated in that competition.
It's embarrassing.
Yeah, but I kind of had. I know she has some notes. I had the same thing where, like, Carlson starts off really frustrated, but then you see other people come up and they're not doing they don't do as well as him. So for a while there, I thought he was going to win it. But what's he end up like second or third in the end?
I think he ended up like fourth or fifth. But
did he?
Guys, I mean, he was the very first one to go, so there was no real gauge of what was a reasonable time. And excuse me. Go ahead, Chad.
And it just felt like it. Yeah, I think he felt like it was taking him forever to get it done. And you almost got to chuckle when the next guy comes up and isn't, doesn't get the same, doesn't get as good of a time, basically. So
I think going first was a disadvantage. He, the last part of that contest, the lights kind of change and you have to pass. And he didn't really get to see how long it took for those lights to change, where the other guys had a much better sort of rhythm with that, and he was shooting at targets that were no longer lit up and started getting really pissed off at the end. So, but yeah, I'm sure he would have done better if he had gone later. And I think they should change that event. I think they should keep it, but instead of they had two sort of short sauce passes in the mini nets and then two long ones. I think 1-1 of each would be better because that's the part of the contest that the guys are taking forever on. So,
or maybe let them, let them go twice, like you do in Hardest Shot, like something where they get a feel for it before and then they go through again. I could see that. Although I will, all honesty, did not watch much of the passing one, but I've read a number of people who basically said it was the most boring thing they've watched. So you said you found it interesting, though, that you actually like that one.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's one of the few skills they can show off, right? I mean, the event itself may not be that exciting, but I think you have to have some sort of passing competition. Maybe there's a different way to do it, but I think the idea of a passing competition should stay, even if they completely change it. So.
And then we, just to throw in here, because we've had some brilliant ideas for two new all-star competitions. One is the front-back skate. So instead of just skating around forwards, you actually skate partway forwards and then flip and have to skate the rest of the way backwards, which would give a defenseman a chance to actually prove they can skate. And then the second was, I don't remember. Do you remember the second one?
The deflection challenge, which it was funny. I had a sort of a moment last night. I was watching the post-game press conference with Carlson, Pavelski, and Burns, and one of the media members asked Joe about that, said, hey, it'd be cool to have a deflection contest for you, right, since you're so good at it. So somebody stole your idea already.
Man.
And that one's, I don't know if it's realistic, though, because I don't know how interesting or how you would really do that. But on the surface, it seems like a decent idea. Maybe they incorporate it into one of the other events somehow.
It was probably Kurz. He probably stole it from my Facebook page because I did post it, which was a mistake. Or I guess it was posted on Sports Talk 916. So I'm sure that just like he steals our blog ideas, he steals my ideas for competition.
I don't think it was Kurz.
I'm just kidding.
All right.
Chris happens to listen. We love you, by the way, Chris. Don't feel that.
So that was the skills competition, and then we had the game yesterday.
If you call it that.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's obviously they're not trying as hard as they normally would in a regular season game, but the biggest disappointment, of course, the Pacific Division got their ass kicked. I think after the first half of the game, it was 7 or 8-1. John Gibson was the GOAT of the game, gave up, I think, 7 goals on 9 shots, made 1 or 2 saves, and the crowd started chanting "Ducks suck" as a result to show their appreciation. I'm sure he was slightly embarrassed. At one point, the crowd was chanting "We want Fleury," which Fleury did play the second half of the game. But, yeah, they got off to a horrible start.
Yeah, for a San Jose crowd to chant "We want Fleury," things have to be going poorly. So,
yeah, it's funny. I've talked to my girlfriend about this quite a bit. Like, if he didn't play for Vegas, I would absolutely love Fleury. Like, he's a great dude. And I think fans see that as well. Like, he in the crowd being there yesterday, I mean, it was like half boos and half cheers when he came out for the game. So he's a very likable figure, even though he plays for a team that Sharks fans can't stand. But they struggled, so they couldn't come back. It was good to see Carlson get a couple goals. Pavelski hit a post and missed a few opportunities. Burnsley got one as well. But the one cool part I liked that when Carlson did score, he played to the crowd both times and tried to pump up the crowd. And he seemed to really be enjoying himself out there, which I thought was cool. I mean, he's the brand new Shark, and he seemed to enjoy it even more than Burnsley and Pavelski.
Yeah, you really feel like he's bought into the culture, right? Like he's assimilated into the San Jose culture. And then the last thing we have in here, which I actually thought was both cute and really well done, was the kids, right? So Burns and Pavelski's kids were really big, featured very heavily on TV and Twitter feeds and Facebook feeds and everything. Burns' daughter Peyton was doing red carpet interviews, which I think we can just replace Brody.
I heard Brody had a nice little back and forth on Brody's did a Periscope on Twitter, and they were giving each other crap, which was pretty funny.
And then I think Burns' son just had a camera following him 24/7. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a video of him going through and getting signatures from everybody in the locker room, and then he's like, "Dad, can you sign mine too?" Which I thought was
Yeah.
funny.
Jagger, Burns' youngest, or his only son. He's got his daughter Peyton, who did the interviews. So Jagger was there, and then Pavelski's son, I don't know his name. They were on the ice for all events. Even during the game yesterday, they were on the bench during the game. During the skills competition, they were on the ice, and they actually demonstrated some of the events before the guys did it. So it just speaks to the Sharks organization and how much of a family atmosphere, which Carlson talked about, how cool that was, and that he thinks that's a really cool thing. I guess the other Carlson thing with the All-Star game we should talk about is, should he have played? Do we think he should have played with the injuries he's dealing with, which we'll talk about later?
I think that's a good transition actually into our next topic too. Is Carlson in general, right? So
Yeah.
we know he's got a contract. There's going to be contract negotiations, and there's a big question of whether he's staying or going. And unfortunately, we're not going to know for a while because the trade deadline has to end before I think that's a serious conversation.
February 25th, I think, is when he can sign the year deal. Yeah.
But I was encouraged by one, like we said, he seems to have become part of that kind of culture of San Jose, right? He was really into whipping up the fan base and being a part of it. And I think, no, I don't think he should have played from a like season perspective.
Right. Yeah.
But I think that what he said was, it was in San Jose, and he felt like he had to. I think he felt like he had to play and represent when it's in his new hometown. So.
Well, and I can speak to that personally. Like when I was debating whether to buy tickets to this game, I pretty much decided if Carlson's playing, I'm going to go. If he's not playing, I'm not going. And it's not because I don't like Pavelski and Burns. It's just they've been around for so long that I've seen them, and it was cool to have him there. And I think it was a really nice gesture of him to go out of his way to do that in his first year as a team. He had no obligation to do that. And I'm with you. I, in a way, wish he probably wouldn't have, but that's the one benefit to them getting their ass kicked in the first game is he didn't have to play another full game after that. And then there's a dark side of me that says, okay, did he play in this game sort of as a thank you to the crowd, knowing that he may be leaving after this year, and he wanted to build up some good vibes and show that he did enjoy his time here this year, even though he plans on leaving? I don't think that's the case, but a dark part of me sort of wonders.
I don't like that theory.
No, I don't.
So I'm just gonna ignore it. No, I think. I mean, I definitely felt. You and I both kind of gone back and forth. I think on whether he's staying or what. And we're going to talk in a minute about what it would kind of some of the downsides to keeping him. Right. There's definitely some problems if you decide to sign Carlson and he stays on. But hey, Greg. I think that. The fact that he went, it shows me more that he wants to be a part of this community. So I'm seeing it. I'm choosing to see it as a positive. He's
it's very more likely community-based guy in Ottawa. He did a lot of charity work as well. So he's one of those guys that's very active in any community that he plays in. But so let's get into his contract. I guess the base question is, let's just get right to it. Do you think he comes back? What percentage would you put on that possibility?
I think I'd say it's 80% is kind of what I was thinking. 80-90%. I think it's a very high probability he comes back. I think honestly that some of the problems we're going to talk about in a second, I think Wilson puts on the back burner and just focuses on keeping him here, just like he focused on getting him here in the first place. I think when we talk about the reason why is the defense when you have Carlson is just totally different. I mean, Dylan's playing great defense with Carlson as his partner. You basically have three, once Vlasic gets back up to normal Vlasic ability, you have three really good defensive lines. And I think that's what wins Stanley Cups in the end. While offensive guys shooting is great, having good defense is going to be, as it is in most sports, right? One of the deciding factors. So.
Although we'll get into a second. If he stays around, you're probably going to see Dylan or Braun or maybe both go just to make the money work. But the one thing I wanted to, as far as my percentage for Carlson, you said 80%, right? 80, 90%.
Yeah,
I'm going to put it at 65%, just because I don't know what he's thinking. If you go purely off his body language, and I don't think there's any doubt whatsoever he has enjoyed his time here. He even said as much yesterday that he's enjoyed every minute, and I believe that. I don't think he's being facetious there. And you see that even during the games. I mean, he's mucking it up with Burnsley. I think that was one of the things I was worried about coming into San Jose, is how was he going to mesh with Burns, another guy who takes up a lot of ice time. He's very offensive. I mean, they're pretty much same type of player. There's some differences, obviously, in terms of size and speed and agility, but they serve very similar roles. And, was there enough puck to go around? But personality-wise, they're probably closer to each other than he's closer to Burns than any other guy in the team, which I think is really cool to see, that those guys don't mind sharing the limelight, and it just speaks to them as individuals, both of them really, Burnsy and Carlson, that they're willing to take a little bit of a lesser role because one another is there. So
it seems like he's a personality fit too. Like it really seems like being a team full of big personalities. Yeah, he fits in really well with his pirate look and his he's always joking and always happy, and I think that works out really well.
Yeah.
So I guess the big question is, how much money is that going to take to keep him? And because that kind of affects everything, right? How much you pay him is going to impact who else you can keep around and how long you can sign him for.
So I think if he stays, I think he gets the 8 years. Although I was thinking the other day, I could potentially see a situation where, okay, this is his first year in San Jose. Maybe he's not ready to commit for 8 years, but he's had enough of a good time that he wants to try it out for a few more years. It would obviously be a huge risk injury-wise to only take a 2, 3, 4, 5 year deal. But I could see that if he thinks, okay, we've got a window of 2 or 3 years here to win, and I'm not sure long-term if this is where I want to be, but for the next few years, certainly. But I don't see that happening just because he's going to want the full 8 years. But I did have a brief thought that maybe that was a possibility. Money-wise, I think he's going to target the contract that Doughty got with LA last offseason, which was 8 years at $11 million per year, so $88 million, which Doughty actually negotiated that deal himself. He didn't have an agent. I think Carlson comes in right around that same amount, anywhere from 10.5 to 11.5 million per if he stays.
Cool. That's a big number.
It is a big number. Keep in mind, though, Burnsley's making 8, but he signed, 2 years ago, and the market has gone up since then. So,
yeah, and I think that's going to be. So let's talk about that. Let's say it's 10 million. Let's just throw that out as the number.
Yeah.
What's the impact on the rest of the roster?
So the biggest possible impact in question is Pavelski, right? He's the other major free agent the Sharks have. And Pavelski's really, they're in a tough position with him. Obviously, he's had a tremendous season, but at the same time, he's 35 years old. And with the season he's had, I think he's going to probably want at least 3 years, maybe even 4 years. And the team, the most I would want to give him is 2 years. And I think probably if they do reach an agreement, they probably settle at 3 years. That's probably the fairest compromise. I think Pavelski will probably want 4. They would probably want to do 2, so you probably meet in the middle at 3. But money-wise, making it work is going to be the challenge. I feel like if Carlson stays, and then the only way Pavelski stays is he takes a massive hometown discount, which that's a lot to ask your captain to do when he's had a really good season.
So he's had probably his best year, or close to his best year. And he's at $6 million a year right now. Kane's making $7 million. So you ask him to make less money, playing better than Kane, you ask him to make less money than Kane. I'm with you. I think he signs 3 years if he signs a contract. I think that's what they get. Yeah. But I think they're going to have to go $7 million or more to keep him.
Which they can't. There's no way to keep Pavelski and Carlson. If Carlson gets 10 plus and Pavelski's at 7 plus, the only way that possibly works is they decimate much of the rest of the team. I mean, the other free agents they got, the important ones are restricted free agents. Meyer is a restricted free agent. Donskoy is a restricted free agent. Kevin LeBanc as well. Some other smaller guys as well. Well, really, those are the three important ones. As far as unrestricted free agents, you got Pavelski, Carlson, and then Donskoy is really the only other important one. So if you kept both of those guys, you can say goodbye to Donskoy. You can say goodbye to LeBanc. You'd probably have to trade Braun and Dillon. You might even have to move another contract like Vlasic or Jones, which both those guys have trade clauses, so good luck doing that. I don't see them moving Couture. I don't see them moving Kane. I don't see them moving Timo Meyer. He'll stick around. They have to sign him. He's going to take a lot of money as well, but they're not going to get rid of Timo. They're not going to get rid of Hurl. So to keep both of them, if they're not able to get Pavelski on a hometown discount, is going to be really difficult.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think LeBlanc, however you pronounce it properly, I don't think he's here. I don't think he makes it to the end of the year. We can talk about that some if we talk about trades, but I think Donskoy and Timo, like, you're talking about the future of the team. If you start trading guys like that to keep Pavelski, and do you gut your future team to
exactly? That's exactly where I was going. That's the hard part for me. Is like, on one hand, you got loyalty and sentimental value with Pavelski, and don't get me wrong, he's still a very good player. So I don't want to paint him as kind of a Joe Thornton status at this point, where it's purely loyalty. Sure. And Joe still contributes as well, but not the same level as Pavelski. So he's still a very good player, but he's 35 years old. And do you want to keep him around and give up young players? Like you said, I mean, Donskoy isn't as young as LeBanc. And LeBanc will get into, like you said, but I mean, LeBanc is 21, 22 years old. Do you want to get rid of guys that young to keep a guy who's probably only going to have one or two more productive seasons?
Yeah, it's more like a Marlowe comparison to me, right? Like, Marlowe had a great season before we got rid of him, and I think that the nice thing about it is I think Wilson is willing to make those sacrifices. He's a longer term, bigger picture guy. Because Jumbo is an anomaly. Because I think you could sign Jumbo for $50 a year if
he may have to next year.
Yeah. If you get to keep playing as a Shark, I think he'll take whatever they're willing to sign him for.
Yeah.
But I mean, Pavs deserves to play on a team and get paid well.
He does.
And I think that may mean that if we keep Carlson, I don't think we keep Pavelski. If we don't get Carlson, I think we keep everybody. I mean, I think.
So that's a good avenue to go down. My worry is if they don't keep Carlson, they massively overpay Pavelski because they say, well, we've got the money, let's just pay him and keep him. When really they should turn around and use that money on another premier free agent like Artemi Panarin of the Blue Jackets or somebody of that sort. Find another guy that can have as big of an impact as Carlson. Don't just burn all that money on Pavelski and Thornton because the team, I mean, you've seen this team without Carlson the last week. It isn't pretty.
No.
So I hope they don't go that route if Carlson leaves and just sort of give that money to the guys that are already here.
So let's talk a little bit. So we recently signed, since we're talking about roster outlook, right? So we know Sorensen's staying, or I mean, at 1.5 million, getting rid of him doesn't. You just signed him for 2 years. Trading him or getting rid of him doesn't help your salary cap very much, anyways. Radil is on for another year, which I think is honestly a steal at $700,000 for a year.
Yeah, I differ a little bit. The price is great. I mean, you can't beat that price. I don't know what the minimum NHL contract is, but that has to be close to it. So, I mean, you can't beat the price or even the year. My only sort of question with Radil is, I mean, the guy's been in the NHL for, 2 months, and you're going to hand him a contract already? It seems a little bit risky on that front. Then again, it's $700,000. If he fizzles out, it's
1 year, right? I mean,
he's slowed down since his hot start, and it just felt like a little early to give him that. I would have given it to him maybe 2 or 3 months from now. But
yeah, I think the worry was probably 2 or 3 months from now if he's having still a stellar season. Then how much does he cost to get a deal? Right now, you can lock him down. No one's really trying to buy him.
Right.
I think if he ends up finishing the season and he plays extremely well the rest of the season, then you've got some competition for signing him. So
yeah. All right, so those are the guys that have signed. We kind of went through with the possible decisions Doug Wilson faces next year. It's all going to come down to Carlson and Pavelski. Everything else after that is secondary. So jumping into trade deadline. So the trade deadline comes up in February. The Sharks arguably have a few different needs. I think, Chad, you and I might differ on what their biggest need is. So let's go into that. What do you think this team needs, if anything, heading into the trade deadline?
My number one at this point is a fourth line center. If you'd asked me months ago, I probably would have said another scoring wing. But with the new third line looking the way it is, right?
Hurdle.
Yeah, Hurdle playing center.
Really is our first line, honestly. But yeah,
right. Yeah. Right. But Kane and Donskoy are really picking up. They're really playing well. You have three good scoring lines. I think that fourth line is pretty weak. It's kind of just a, hey, don't screw up line, right? Like, go out there, eat up some time, try not to let them score a goal. And I think a good center on that line would be a big pickup. Or you and I have talked, maybe you pick up a center to replace Jumbo and you bump Jumbo down and let Jumbo anchor a fourth line.
And we'll get into the names who could fill that role here in a second. I'm going to go with your answer a month ago. I think a scoring winger is a bigger need. The reason I say that, you look at right now in the top nine, you got Sorensen in the top nine, and you got LeBanc in the top nine as far as the first three lines. It was Radil. He got kicked back to the fourth line. And do you want Sorensen in the bank, or Sorensen and Radil, or Radil and LeBanc filling top nine roles? I think is what it comes down to. In the last 2 weeks, I think you've seen the Hurdle line, as you talked about, has been excellent. The Couture line has been decent. Couture has been with Meyer, and then Radil and LeBanc have slipped in and out. The line that has struggled, I think, is Thornton, Pavelski, and Sorensen. Thornton has good chemistry with Pavelski. He has good chemistry with Sorensen, but those three together haven't quite clicked yet. And the other way I kind of tie that back to your fourth line point is that if you do add a top nine winger, then suddenly Sorensen, LeBanc, or Radil, and two of those guys are now on your fourth line, and that fourth line becomes that much stronger. None of those guys are centers, so it won't take care of that issue that you point out. But I think if you have two really strong wingers on the fourth line as a result of adding to your top nine, that the center position on the fourth line isn't as important. And the other thing I would add too is, the fourth line, is the fourth line that important? They play 8-9 minutes a night. I certainly think they can have an impact on the game, but I feel like a top nine winger would have a bigger impact on the team. Of course, the price is always also going to be much higher for that. So
yeah, and I don't disagree. Like I said, I would have said winger months ago, and I don't think it's ever a bad idea to add a scoring winger onto your top three. But I think my thing about center is maybe they can play more than 9 minutes if you have a good center. Maybe they can play more than 9 minutes if that becomes a line that's actually contributing some offense and not just eating up time so guys can rest. But so let's talk about who's up for grabs and who fits the bill of either of our scenarios.
Yeah, and a quick shout out, Steve just joined us on the Facebook Live. So thanks for joining us, Steve. Hope you feel better. See you're sick. So as far as targets for the possible trade deadline, it depends on what they decide to attack, right? If they go for a center or a winger. If they go the winger route, I'll talk about that since that's my preference. There's a few guys out there. The big names are Wayne Simmons. And then you got Michael Furlan and Carolina, although he actually plays center. The Rangers have a couple of guys out there. Kevin Hayes plays center. Matt Zuccarello plays on wing. The Red Wings, Gustav Nyquist plays on the wing. The guy I would love, and we've talked about this priorly, Chad, is Wayne Simmons, just because I feel like outside of Evander Kane, the Sharks don't really have anyone up front in the forward ranks that is sort of gritty and is physical and, will stand up when shit is happening out there that shouldn't be happening. And Kane's kind of takes that role on. On the back end, Dylan will pitch in as well, but there's no one else up front that really scares anyone from a physical side. And I would love to see Kane sort of have a partner in crime in Wayne Simmons.
Yeah, I'll add an asterisk to my center argument. It's if we can't get Simmons. So, yeah, if we could get
Well, there you
Simmons,
go. Okay.
then I certainly. I mean, I don't think that we can. I don't think we have enough, which we'll talk about in a minute. I don't think we have enough to give up to get someone like him.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you could throw Simmons, especially if you could put him on that third line, maybe move Donskoy up or move Donskoy somewhere, and it be Hurdle, Kane, and Simmons. I mean, that'd be a scary line to be out on the ice.
Yeah. Could bash some brains in for sure.
Yeah, it'd be a physical, kind of old school third line, and I wouldn't worry about as much of our
Simmons
guys
is
taking
kind
hits.
of built for the playoff style of game, right? I mean, you want guys like that, and he's also very, very good in front of the net. After Pavelski, he's probably the second best tipper in the NHL, so you could have the two best tippers on the same team, and he would make the second power play unit that much more lethal too. He would take, Pavelski's role in front of the net on the second unit. So he would add a lot of ingredients that this team lacks. So,
And then I would say if we're talking center, I would say Hayes and Nyquist are probably the two that I think are good, would be good fits, and we'd have the best chance of actually being able to sign. And Nyquist, I know, plays wing, but he also plays center, so I think he's versatile. He can be put in either one. And then Hayes, I think New York is going to. I think that team's going to hemorrhage players.
Oh yeah, they're definitely shedding salary and cleaning house with anyone that's not signed long term.
And so, if you're talking about picking up a rental, I think that's going to be a good place to shop. Because
the word rental is a good thing to talk about. So Doug Wilson, he sat down and interviewed with some of the Sharks media guys a few weeks back before the break, and normally Doug Wilson, the trade deadline, is really keen on saying, we want guys that fit now and guys that fit for the future. And this year, they are taking a little bit of a different approach. He said he's definitely open to just rentals this year, and I think that's because of what we just talked about with Pavelski and Karlsson. They're not going to have money to bring in anyone else significant after those two guys. So they are definitely looking at rentals probably only this year, unless you can happen to swing a guy for as a long-term deal for not very much amount of money, but guys typically like that don't get traded around the trade deadline.
And you're hamstrung because you can't negotiate with Karlsson until after the trade deadline. So you've really got to get a rental because you don't know what your cap looks like next year. Yeah. So I think that and I agree that's a weird way for Wilson. That's unusual, but I think with the team we have, you're really talking about what's a piece we need just for the playoffs, right? Or what's a piece we need just to get us through the rest of this.
And Steve is absolutely right. Now. The Sharks are all about now. It's all in this year, especially because we don't know if Karlsson is sticking around. So Steve is absolutely correct that this is the year where you put all their poker chips on the table, which that leads right into our next kind of part is what assets do the Sharks have to give up in a possible trade around the trade deadline?
Yeah, and I think it's going to be tough because you're going to have to give up multiple things in order to get one guy at this point, I think, with what we have to trade. So I already brought it up, but I think Levenk is one of the pieces you have to trade. He's young. He does show –
he's got a lot of skill, but it hasn't really turned into anything, right?
Yeah, he's got a lot of skill. He shows moments of brilliance, right, like flashes, especially on power play. He can look really good. So I think he's someone you can sell as a player that you can put some work into and get him up there. And then I would say, and I think we probably both agree on this, the next most likely, in my opinion, is Ryan. It doesn't seem like DeBoer likes Ryan very much. There's times when I think he should play Ryan over Heed, and he plays Heed. And so I think that he's a good enough player to start on an NHL team. If you're not going to play him, you might as well use him as leverage to get somebody else.
Yeah, and I think Lebanc definitely has more value of those two, right? But in terms of, excuse me, in terms of the guys currently on the roster, those are really the only two guys I could see even being included in a trade that would bring back anything decent. So after that, you're looking at prospects and picks. As far as picks, they're in sort of limited inventory because they've given out first-round picks for Karlsson and Kane in the past few years. So their first round picks, I think, are accounted for the next 2 seasons. So they don't really have a first round pick to throw out there. And even their second and third round picks are quite depleted the next couple of years. So they're really in a bind as far as having limited ammunition for this trade deadline between not really having that many guys on the roster that can go. Their picks are kind of already accounted for the most part. And then it turns to prospects, right? Which they do have a fairly healthy amount of prospects, but do you want to, get rid of those guys when 2 years from now you're probably going to need them?
Yeah, I think that. So I'm going to talk a little bit, and I'm going to jump into some of these questions that we got because they're pertain to what we're going to. But I think you also have Dell and Heat in there, right? As possibilities of like throwing in to sweeten a pot. Maybe I don't think anybody's trading for Heat, but I think if you say, hey, we'll give you a pair, we'll give you Ryan and Heat, right? A defensive pair together. I think that can help. Josh Gilmore's asking if we think that Pavelski could be traded before the end of the season. I don't think there's any way that happens.
No, and we were just talking about Pavelski possibly leaving at the end of the year since he's a free agent. But no, we are not suggesting trading him by any means, and that's definitely not happening.
Yeah, I mean, yes, you could get a good player in exchange for him, or maybe even a couple if you get someone who doesn't show promise now. But I think you're crazy to trade the captain in the middle of the.
You don't trade your captain in the middle of the season when you're trying to win the cup. No, that's not happening.
Yeah, I definitely think defensemen are probably in more demand as far as the entire NHL goes. So maybe you can do a Ryan Heed package or throw LeBlanc in there, but then you're trading 3 guys to really pick up one forward. And
and that kind of segues to our next topic is they got injuries on defense right now. Vlasic and Carlson are out. Both will probably be back after the break, but they may need Heed and Ryan. They've certainly needed them the last week or two. I don't think you could trade both of them. You definitely have to keep one of them because if anyone else goes down, I mean, sure, Jacob Middleton looked great in the 8 minutes he played total in the one game, but after Middleton, I mean, you're really reaching far into your system. So they're going to need to keep at least one of those guys. But
when I would say the same thing about Dell, not necessarily for injury, but just you've got 2 guys who are good playing down, at the AHL level, but do you want to bring them up for playoffs and then be like, hey, welcome to the NHL? We need you to play one of our playoff games. I feel like it's too late in the season to be bringing up a new backup goalie and trying them out unless you absolutely have to.
Yeah, certainly next year I could see them moving Dell to save Dell's not making that much. I think he makes around $2 million, but they could certainly move him to save a little bit of money for Carlson and Pavelski. To quickly hit on Josh's comment, Josh was speculating that, hey, maybe Carlson takes less money to stick around. I don't see that happening. Pavelski might, but Carlson has no loyalty to this organization. He's going to want max value, in my opinion. And that's not to say he hasn't enjoyed it here, but you're not going to get a hometown discount from a guy who has only been here half a season.
No, if he was playing for love of a team or a city, I think he'd still be where he was. I think he'd still be in Ottawa. I don't see him coming to San Jose and then being like, you know what, this is my new hometown. I'm here for good.
Yeah.
I just don't.
One quick caveat I'll throw in on Carlson real quick before we get too far off track again. Last night I saw he posted a picture of him having dinner with Steven Stamkos of the Tampa Bay Lightning, which if he leaves the Sharks, that's been the number one team rumored for him to go to is Tampa Bay because he has some close friends there. Stamkos included Victor Hedman, who's a fellow Swede, one of the best defensemen in the NHL, won the Norris Trophy last year. I think he's close with Kucherov as well. And that is the one team I could see him leaving the Sharks for. I think the Sharks will match money-wise. I don't think it's going to be an issue. California taxes, he'll make less, but as far as actual salary, it won't be an issue. And the Sharks are competitive, but I could see him leaving to go to Tampa Bay because they do have a better team than San Jose, and they're better set up for the future. But we'll see what happens.
All right, so moving on to our next topic, which kind of also brings in Carlson. Carlson's a major part of today's show, obviously. we want to talk about injury. So you actually had some notes because you saw Carlson while you were there.
Yeah. So when I was at the All-Star game yesterday, I wanted to pay very, very close attention to how Eck looked out there and to see if I could sort of figure out what sort of injury. I don't know. Have they even said whether it's upper body or lower body? I don't think they have, but the fact that
It's
he was
lower.
not moving around well, we know it's lower, right? Even though they haven't said that. So anyway, I was watching him closely in warm-ups, and granted, the All-Star game is a very social event, so he spent a lot of time socializing with other guys on, the different conferences, but he was very immobile during the warm-up. Most of the time he was standing around and taking it very easy. He did take a few shootout attempts with the guys and skated around, but he was definitely not moving at the same pace as the rest of the guys. And I particularly noticed he seemed to be favoring his left leg. He was not putting a lot of weight on it. He was lifting it a lot after he was shooting, and you could tell he was very tender with his left leg. The bright side was during the game, he moved around pretty good and didn't seem to really be limited all that much. But I definitely, it looked like somewhere on his left leg, possibly his knee, is what he's nursing from what I could tell.
Yeah, I think he's probably, like we talked about earlier, right? I think if it hadn't been in San Jose, he would have been resting instead of being in the All-Star game. But
yeah,
it sounds like from what you were saying, and from watching him play, I didn't see anything in the play, which is why I was glad to hear that you'd actually seen him kind of off screen.
Yeah.
But it's good to see that he can play if he needs to. Hopefully that means the next few days off will get him back to 100% or close. And then go ahead.
I was going to say they did ask him in the press conference about the injury, and he sort of dodged the questions a little bit, which you can read into that what you want. And he didn't for sure say he would be after the break. He said, "Yeah, hopefully I'll be back after the break." So I don't know. I'm a little bit concerned about it, to be honest with you. That even if he does come back, is this a thing that lingers the rest of the season, and he's not, the player that he was before the injury?
Well, I think that kind of brings up the other person. So maybe if it's one of those things where Vlasic can come back, and if they can play without Carlson with Vlasic, then maybe they give Carlson a little more time off. So I could see them doing one game like that, and then if it doesn't look better, just saying you're going to have to play through.
Yeah, and I will say Carlson has a history of playing with injury. In the playoffs with Ottawa a few years back when they went to the conference finals, he had a pretty severe ankle injury, and despite that, he was the best player in the playoffs up until they got eliminated. So he does have a history of playing through injury, but if you go back to the last game that he played before the break against the Coyotes, he was a -4 that night, and probably the worst game that him and Burns, for that matter, played all season. And you could tell he was not in a good place physically. He just was very ginger out there and was not moving very well.
I count that loss as being because Carlson was injured. Like I literally, when I was looking at the game since we were last on the show, and there's a span of losses there, and I was like, yeah, those are all Carlson injury losses. Like even the one he's playing the game in, he just doesn't look right. I think so. Steve said, let him get 100%, just make the playoffs. I think that's honestly the story for both of them. I think Vlasic, that has been the story. People have been asking all the time, well, he's day to day. When's he coming back? And I think that the argument there is, well, if we're doing okay without him and we're not in risk of losing out on making the playoffs, why wouldn't you want to let the guy get back to 100% before you bring him in?
Yeah, and I'm going to differ on this one a little bit. Vlasic, I think they have that luxury, but we just saw what the team looks like without Carlson. And I don't know how many points in the standings they can afford to bleed. And here's why I say that. We talked about this a lot on our first episode and then our guest appearance on Greg's main show as well. Looking ahead at the playoff picture, okay, Calgary has pulled ahead in the division. They're 6 points ahead in the division, also have a game in hand on the Sharks. I don't see the Sharks catching Calgary. I think Calgary's probably got the division on lockdown unless they fall flat on their face, which they haven't shown this year. But then it's, okay, the Sharks and Vegas are pretty much locked into the 2 and 3 spots and vice versa. One of them is going to be the 2, one of them is going to be the 3 seed because the Ducks lost 11 in a row. They fell off the face of the planet. Edmonton has gone down the shitter and fired their GM as a result. So nobody's catching the Sharks or Vegas that's behind them in the division, and I don't see the Sharks catching Calgary, and I don't see Vegas catching them either. So really, it's a two-team race between the Sharks and Vegas to who has home ice in the first round. And we've talked about this a lot. Against Vegas, I think it's absolutely critical the Sharks have home ice. If they don't, I don't see us beating them. So because of that, I mean, we're 3 points ahead of Vegas right now. And that's a very tight window, and you don't want to get behind in that race and be fighting uphill possibly.
Yeah, I agree. I agree that we won home ice. I mean, going into Vegas is just terrible for us. And I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's a mental thing, but the Sharks just do not play well on that ice. And if you can get it so that you have advantage, I think at this point you have to take it, which is funny because I think we've talked before where normally we don't really think home ice is a big deal. But in this case, with this team, I do. I agree. So I guess that's why I say I think you try a game without Carlson if he's still injured. You see how that goes. And if it looks anything like the last games without him, then you kind of ask him to step up.
Well, it depends on the injury too, right? I mean, we don't know what the injury is. We don't know what the severity is. And they have said, he's not risking further injury by playing, which I kind of argue that logic to begin with. I don't think it's humanly possible to not risk further injury with any injury. I think that's a bullshit excuse that teams use when the guy isn't seriously hurt. But it depends on the injury. I mean, if it's something more severe, then I agree with Steve, sit him out and let him rest. If it's minor and he can play through it without, making it too
a serious risk.
Yeah. So it depends risk reward, right? But I do think, it's critical they either stay ahead of Vegas or within reach to where at the end of the season they're not packing their bags for Vegas and crossing their fingers they figured out. I will say, though, it's really big that they did beat Vegas in Vegas a couple of weeks ago. I didn't think they played all that well that game, but still just the mental block of finally beating Vegas in the regular season was a nice sort of Christmas present.
What I think Christmas present. If we talk injuries in general, Carlson was the first one that I felt like really impacted our team as far as being able to win.
Yes.
So we had Vlasic, we had Donskoy out for a bit, we had who else? Braun was out for a bit.
We've done early in the year. You had Hurdle missed a few games. Yep. Couture missed some time.
They've done a great job of playing with those guys off of the roster, which I think is great. I think Carlson was almost one too many kind of thing. Like it's just you had. I mean, Burns has got to be exhausted because he's playing like 30 minutes of ice time.
Well, and I thought that was the biggest effect was Burns was not nearly as effective because you just said it. He was playing way too many minutes and he was a ragged dog out there, and he's been pretty awful the last few games without Carlson because of the extra load he's taken on.
Well, I think Carlson being on the ice takes some of the offensive pressure off of him, so he doesn't pinch as much. He doesn't get caught as often as the last game. I mean, he was trying to pinch in and then trying to get all the way back to play defense, and he just can't do it. I mean, he's not good enough to do it for that long.
Games have been probably his worst of the season, and I don't think there's any doubt it's directly related to Carlson. And Steve is absolutely right that the All-Star break is coming at a very good time for the Sharks. They were stumbling into the break mainly because of the injuries and all the travel, I think, had a lot to do with it as well. But yeah, the All-Star break comes at a great time for the team, and hopefully starting on Saturday against Phoenix, Vlasic will definitely be back. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Carlson, I think, will likely be back as well. I could see him missing one or two more games, but I think he probably comes back Saturday as well.
Yeah, I'm excited to see the team come off of the break. I was very happy to see the team going into the break, like to see that they went to a break, because that last game looked like an all-star game. I mean, 14 goals scored, right?
Yeah, we haven't talked about that game, but wow, what a ridiculous game that was.
Yeah, we decided not to talk too much about the games before the break because they're just too depressing. But I think I want to say just real quick before we get out of here, but the one thing I would say about the pre-break struggles, there are some things I liked. One, Timo scored.
Yes, that was huge to get him off the schneid.
Yeah, getting him off Schneider was huge, and then he came back and he didn't score the next game, but he had 2 assists the next game. So he's hopefully getting his game back a little bit, a little more confidence now that he's finally got a goal in. And then, I mean, I keep talking up Hurdle, but Hurdle was all heart in the last game. I mean, I
He's been
put
their
the
best
whole
player the last month.
yeah,
along with Carlson when he was healthy.
Yeah, I agree. I think the comeback and the win was on him. You have Kane, who Kane gets a good goal at the right time, but I think if Hurdle's not out there busting his ass to get those 3 goals, we don't have a chance. So I like seeing those two heating up to kind of add to the guys who already we know can score and can assist. So
Steve mentions that if you're going to the February 2nd game, which is against Phoenix, I won't be at that one, but any of our viewers, there might be Dan Boyle signing autographs of the Barracuda game before that. Insider info from Steve, so there you go. Speaking of, we'll do a quick preview of the next game's coming up. So they play Arizona on Saturday at home, and then they immediately go right back out on the road for, I believe, a 4-game trip. I think they go through Winnipeg and then Calgary, Vancouver, and Edmonton. So a couple of really tough tests in Winnipeg and Calgary in particular. The Calgary game, while I don't think they will catch Calgary as we talked about, that's still an important divisional game. But that's a tough trip coming out of the break. Vancouver and Edmonton are not tough by any means, but Winnipeg and Calgary are 2 of the teams they will be fighting for the Western Conference title for come playoff time. So a big road trip early. The Sharks, the one thing I am worried about with this team going into the second half outside of the injuries that we talked about is they have not particularly been a very good road team this year. They've been a dominant home team, but on the road, early in the year, they were terrible on the road. They've been better lately, but they're still right around 500 or slightly below that on the road. So hopefully they don't stumble on this trip coming out of the break, but this will be a good early test. And there's only 30 games left, so after this road trip, the vast majority of the rest of the season they have at home. I think they have one more Eastern trip to like Detroit and Pittsburgh, but this trip and then one more Eastern trip, and the rest of the trips are all local with the West Coast teams. So we'll see what happens.
I'm really glad Coyotes are in there before Flames. I think it'll be a good chance.
A little bit of an extended break at home. Yeah.
Well, and it gives Vlasic, and if Carlson's back, right, it gives them a game to get their feet again, because no one looks good. I mean, Vlasic's been gone for 2 months now, right? How long has it been?
I wouldn't say quite that long. About 2-3 weeks, I think.
Is it? Is that it? Oh, it seems forever.
Feels like 2 months. It
feels like 2 months.
And so, which is funny because they said day to day, and day to day has turned into about 30 days. But yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, six. Well, I mean, that's more than 6 games. He's been out for quite a few games at this point.
Yeah.
I think no one comes back from that and is immediately ready to go up full speed against the tougher teams, right? So I think having Arizona as a game to get your legs under you again will be good for the whole team.
Yep, it ties right into what Steve just said. Steve says, I'm concerned about them coming after a long break. Usually they do not start out well. That is true of the Sharks historically. Typically they're sluggish out of long breaks. They're also typically sluggish coming back from long road trips, which won't be the case here. But this year, though, they have done better with long breaks. They've typically have played their best hockey this year when rested. When they've had 2, 3, 4 games or days off between the breaks, they've typically played very well. And if you go back to the Christmas break when they had 4 days off, they came out of Christmas break red hot. I mean, they won 7 out of 8, 10 out of 8, 10 out of 11, whatever it was. Eventually had the 7-game win streak up until they stumbled into the All-Star break. But I'm not as worried about that, and I think the fact that we are playing Phoenix is a huge benefit. They should be able to beat Phoenix. I know they lost to them on this last road trip, but again, that was injury-driven. So assuming Carlson and Vlasic is back, I think they take care of business in Phoenix, and then the road trip is going to be the bigger challenge.
Yeah, I mean, the Flames, if you want to have any hope at getting first place, which I'm with you. I don't think they make up the gap, but you've got to beat them in this game because it's just too many points. You can't give them 2 and not get any.
Even if they don't win, I just want to see them be competitive. Just don't get blown out of the building. So,
I
all
want to see
right,
more.
guys. I think that's about it before we go on for 3 hours here.
Yeah, thanks for joining us on Sharks Talk 916. Please feel free to check out our blogs on sportstalk916.com and also the Sports Talk 916 Facebook page.
Follow our Twitter account, Sharks Talk 916. Chad and I like to rant during the games and not sort of tell you what's happening, but give our insight on it. So follow our Twitter account and check us out.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
See you guys.